And welcome to another episode of Live from the Blue Seats. I'm your host, Rob, joined this week by John-Luc Shapiro. Producer JL is with me doing double duty, both producing and co-hosting, as it's just a two-person show this week here on the pod. Dave, Nick, Becky, all otherwise engaged, but we'll hopefully have them all back on in future episodes. On today's show, we are recapping the Rangers' strong return from the All-Star break. We're going to talk goaltending because that seems to be the top story of the weeks, last couple of weeks, I should say. And we will get to your questions, of course, and whatever else might pop into our heads. JL, how are you on this fine Thursday evening? Getting set to release on a Friday, and the Rangers getting ready to play the Chicago Blackhawks to kick off their weekend.
Well, thank you, Rob, again. I'm doing okay. If anyone doesn't know by now, my Twitter account got suspended mysteriously.
Yes,
so I'm trying to
thanks, Elon.
Yeah, I know. So I'm trying to figure that out per se. But other than that, everything is swimmingly. Just enjoying this nice little run of Rangers hockey. It seems like they've kind of figured it out, but I'm doing all right.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into that. The Rangers come back from the break. They were the very first game on the schedule after teams returned to action. Monday night, Colorado Avalanche, and in a super fast-paced game, which the Rangers, I think it's fair to say, sort of struggled to adapt to early on. They come away with a thrilling victory in overtime, 2-1. Alexis Lafreniere gets the overtime winner. And then on Wednesday night, they hosted the Tampa Bay Lightning and played one of their most complete buttoned-up games of the year. Won that one 3-1. On the strength of 2 goals by Jimmy Vesey, one of them an empty netter to give them that 2-goal final margin. So a couple of close games, a couple of, dare I say, playoff style games. And all of a sudden the Rangers are on a 3-game winning streak. If you count that Ottawa game that occurred before the break. So, look, before that, the Rangers were obviously scuffling, playing 500 hockey or slightly worse over the course of 20, 25 games. So good to see them get back to, I think, the things that were making them successful earlier in the year. JL, what was your main takeaway, and which game, I guess, impressed you more? Was it the Colorado win or the Tampa win?
The game that impressed me the most was the Colorado game, because they basically started off slow, and you kind of saw some of the same sort of lethargic attitude, but the thing that I saw that was different than instances previously was the fact that they were sound defensively. And Colorado is a very fast team, as we saw that one Nathan McKinnon goal, which, was seen as a mistake on the coaching staff, but either way, it's a mistake is a mistake. But they were able to kind of limit the damage in terms of the impact that McKinnon or a Rantanen or a Letkinen would have, or even a Makar. So the way that they were able to come back, keep it tight, and then win it, at the end was just awesome, and Alexis Lafreniere just do more of that. You know what I mean? Just do more of that. He has such a good shot. A lot of people don't seem to understand that. I went to a game in his first season in 21 during the abbreviated season. And it was against Buffalo, and not the overtime winner, but there was a game at Madison Square Garden, and he shot a puck. I was sitting in the 400 section, and he shot a puck so hard on net that it legitimately had me going, wow. So I was really, happy to see that he was able to pull that goal off. And it was basically a year apart from the goal that he scored against Calgary right after the All-Star break last year. So the Colorado game was impressive to me because they were basically able to hold their own against a solid Colorado squad. The Tampa Bay game, I was thoroughly impressed because they took that momentum defensively and they were able to keep a cohesive unit together, without issue, and basically handled Tampa perfectly. So I was more impressed with the Colorado game, though, just because of their resolve in terms of how they came back and won the game.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado is certainly the more dangerous team. Now, it's very possible that if this team is going to make a run to a Stanley Cup, they might have to go through both of these teams, and it shows you, the diversity of opponent that you'll have to deal with, right? Some teams are more physically oriented, some teams are tighter checking, some teams will play a faster, more wide open game. I do think it's a little bit of a mischaracterization that like playoff hockey is just kind of like a slow, boring, kind of like half court, to use a basketball term, game. We've seen teams like Florida play pretty wide open and have success with transition heavy game. You've seen it with Colorado as well. Their speed, a team predicated on speed. And then you do have Tampa, who, I think really made their Stanley Cup runs off the back of really strong defense and, puck possession hockey, good goaltending with Vasilevsky. And so, I think it was really good to see the Rangers get tested against those two different styles and prevail, I think, in games that they deserve to win. Now, look, Jonathan Quick was fantastic in the Colorado game. In the first period, it was only a 1-goal game because of him. He makes that stop late in the third to keep it a 1-1 game. He stopped Rantanen from right in front of the net with a minute left. So, that was certainly a big story. But I still think that, as the game wore on, the Rangers, were able to tilt the ice in their favor. And then they really dominated the third period, which, this is something I say all the time, JL, and I'm sure you guys in the group chat probably get it. When the Rangers are down going into a third period, I'm at a point where I almost don't care if they lose the game. I just want to see them dominate the period, right? You want to see them control play, get a lot of chances. And you know what? If you hit a couple of posts, if the goalie makes 3, 4, 5 incredible saves and you lose the game because of that, I could live with that. What bothers me is when a team can't get that extra push when they're down a goal, right? Because that's
right.
Hockey. Like, the team that's down usually does push really hard. And if a team doesn't push, then I get concerned, because then it starts to look like, is there a lack of effort? Is there a lack of belief, right? What's the reason why a team who's expected to push isn't pushing? So I was happy with the third period push. They dominated that third against Colorado. And then to your point with the Tampa game, to me, that was as solid, as sound is the word I kept using, as structured a performance this team has had since October, November, when that was kind of the way they won every game. Now, obviously, they were scoring a little bit more, especially on the power play, which has gone completely cold all of a sudden, which is, maybe not something we'll get to today, but something to watch over the next week or two. But Tampa had 19 shots on goal. They had, if you look at Steve Valiquette's numbers, he posts his ClearSight Analytics recap the day after every game. I think Tampa had a total of 5 high danger scoring chances and 2 medium danger scoring chances, right? So those are the ones that pay attention to.
Right.
7 combined sort of like quality chances in the game. That's about as good as of a defensive game as you could play.
Right.
I was really impressed with the fourth line. Obviously, Veazey gets a couple of goals. Barclay Goodrow had one of his better games, picked up a couple of assists, but was generally pretty solid. Tyler Pitlick got an assist. Johnny Brodzinski scores, right? So pretty much all the production coming from the bottom 6. And that's just, that's, again, something to watch given what this team is likely targeting at the trade deadline.
Right.
Any other thoughts from you on the Tampa game, which again, got the Rangers to a third win in a row?
So you mentioned Jonathan Quick, so that was definitely, a factor. I guess on the negative side, I guess you now have to kind of somewhat begin to think what's up with Mika Zibanejad. Obviously, he was a bit more noticeable in this game. I've noticed lately, over the last couple of contests, he's gotten a little bit more aggressive with the puck. And he's definitely making a lot more plays. He's definitely picking up assists like he did with the Alexis Lafreniere overtime winner. But there's still something missing, and hoping that maybe, at this juncture, he can pick it up a bit because he's starting to get into that mode again where you can see he's skating more with the puck. He's holding it onto it a little more. He seems a bit more confident. I guess the break really did help him out. So maybe this can be an adjustment period to where he can actually begin to find his game again. That's probably the only thing that I can honestly say has really been concerning to me. Obviously, we, like you said, we're not going to really talk about it now, but, when it comes to the trade deadline and the power play, we can obviously, sit here and guess how many, times or the stuff that they need for the team itself to maybe have these things work out. But my only real concern is basically Mika Zibanejad. But other than that, I thought everything was crystal clear, solid.
Yeah. I mean, and I think he's looked slightly better to me. I agree with you since coming back from the break. I think that there was, something to him needing a little bit of a mental reset, maybe even a physical reset. I don't like to speculate, but was there an injury there? Is there, potential, new dad issues with a young baby at home, not getting proper rest and things like that? Again, this is all speculation. We don't know anything about that. He hasn't appeared on the injury report at all this year, I think, other than missing for an illness. I want to say maybe one game or being questionable with an illness. So
I think he had the flu.
Yeah,
right. I think it was one of the West Coast games, or maybe it was an away game. I just remember he had the flu and he was out.
And I think it's fair to say that bug was probably going through the whole team because there was kind of a constant recall, from constant recalls from Hartford and those sorts of things happening. So, look, I think still to your point, JL, like they need more from him. And if they don't have top-notch Mika Zibanejad, it's going to be tough sledding in the playoffs. Now, look, 10 years ago, we might have had a similar conversation about, say, Rick Nash, right? And we would have said, well, Rick Nash has to be great for this team to do anything. And in 2014, he wasn't that great, and they made the Stanley Cup final. So, you can get by. The Rangers have enough talent, and who knows how they'll bolster the roster at the trade deadline. But, I mentioned this to a few people last week. I got bored. I'm a sicko. I went on YouTube, and I pulled up highlights from the playoff run a couple of years ago, and particularly game 3 of the Carolina series. So remember, they're down 2-0. They lost both games in Carolina, close games, tight checking games. They got shut out in game 2. So they come back to the Garden in pretty much a must-win situation. And look, it's a 10-minute highlight package, whatever the NHL or Sportsnet puts on YouTube. But I will tell people to go watch that game, watch those highlights, and just look at how impactful Mika Zibanejad is throughout the game. Now, again, he's involved in some of the goals, but he's just, he's skating like his hair's on fire, and he was just all over the ice. And I think we all remember, it's not that long ago, how incredible he was throughout that entire playoff. Again, he started slow in the Pittsburgh series, but once he kicked into gear, there was really no stopping him.
Right.
And I think the reason I bring that up is, look, the guy is a great player. I'm seeing a little too much like Mika isn't a 1C chatter on Twitter. And I'm like, we're not talking about Derek Stepan here, right? We're not talking about a guy who never eclipsed 56 points in his career. Zibanejad was on pace for 90 plus points and 50 plus goals in the COVID, when the year that COVID shut everything down. He's at least a point per game player. Even when he's struggling, he's pretty much a point per game player.
Right.
And he is absolutely, probably fair to say he's the team's best two-way center. I know people like to point to Trocheck, but he's really not that defensively. He doesn't grade out that well defensively. And his line, I think, is a little bit guilty of playing risky with the puck. Whereas, look, Zibanejad is trusted to check the other team's top guys, as he was against Colorado when they switched the fourth line off of McKinnon and put Mika's line on him. So long way of saying, yes, the Rangers need him to be better. He absolutely needs to be better, but let's not act like the potential's not there. Right. That's right. Do you agree? Or do you have longer term concerns that maybe his best hockey's behind him?
No, I definitely agree with that. I think that there's still a ton of talent there. You could see it. I feel like this is all mental. It's not a physical thing. He's very streaky, and I feel like we got to see a guy who was finally able to really unlock it over the last couple of years. And a lot of people tend to forget that when he came here for the first time, he was just like this. This wasn't something that is, out of the ordinary. He's a very streaky player, but he worked on his game, obviously, no pun intended to the tweet.
Work on your game,
but work on your game, kid. He did work on his game though, and he was able to really come through. Part of me somewhat thinks that he's still having trouble adjusting to the system, because we didn't see this sort of malaise this long when Quinn and Gallant were here. So something tells me maybe he's still trying to figure it out, so to speak. But I still think that he has definitely that there's nothing wrong with the guy. He just needs to figure it out. The guy's talented enough to still put up a bunch of assists, and like you said, he's a point per game player. It'll become concerning to the point where if this ends up lingering on for maybe another month, or maybe if this really lingers into the playoffs, the same concerns we had about Artemi Panarin, last year, when we all thought he was kind of, as the kids say, cooked, and everyone was trying to explore trading him, and then he just kind of
was off. Out. He was off, to be fair. He
was 100%.
All last year, yeah.
Oh yeah, and he still managed to put up 80, 90 points last year.
92 points, I think.
92 points on an off year. Come on, So
yep.
I don't doubt Mika. I know he has the ability to do it. I know a lot. Twitter is reactionary. No kidding. But I still think that there's talent there. But I think if this ends up lingering on into the summer, or at least into the playoff hunt, then the offseason discussion begins to really wrap around. Now we have to support him and find somebody that can basically kind of take or give Mika a tertiary role in terms of being that guy, and, the first person that comes to mind that would be perfect is Elias Pettersson. Will they be able to afford it? That's the question that remains to be seen, because he is still technically available. So I'm not concerned for the time being. I still have a lot of faith in Mika. I know he has the talent and the strength to do so. But if this ends up lingering on for an extended period of time, then I think there is some cause for concern if this goes into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And the other thing that I think is all related, and it comes back to also, like you said, you have to take a hard look at the center position over in the offseason, because you don't know what Filipino is going to be able to give you. I know he's going to try and come back next year, but all of a sudden you're looking potentially maybe not good enough at center, which is, as we know, the most important position. All right, we've beat around this issue, or I guess I shouldn't say we beat around it. We didn't lead with it when it's pretty much the only thing anyone's been talking about regarding the Rangers. So let's dive into it a little bit. The goaltending. So Jonathan Quick has been lights out. He's started and won the last 3 games. Obviously a 7-2 win, a 2-1 win, a 3-1 win. His save percentage is over .920. His goals against in that time is around 1.5. He's, I think, top 10 in the league in goals saved above expected. He has been the better goalie. Let's just not sugarcoat it or say it any other way. That said, the Rangers have been playing it coy with the media, and they've been saying this was a planned reset period for Shesterkin. It was the plan the whole time. I don't know if we believe it, that Quick was going to get the first 2 games out of the All-Star break. And we record this podcast on a Thursday ahead of Friday's game in Chicago, not knowing who the starting goaltender is. I'm going to guess it's going to be Quick. So I don't know if you agree with me on that, JL, but what are your overall thoughts on this goaltending situation, if we're not going to call it a controversy, situationship that we have right now with Quick and Shesterkin?
I like the term situationship. That's such a new age term.
But I worked it in, yeah.
It's such a modern term. It's kind of hilarious, actually. It's kind of a tough question at this point, because you looked at Igor in the All-Star game, and he looked good. But then again, it's also an All-Star game. It is slightly concerning. There is issues with his glove, and I think, knowing the type of person Igor is, he's very hard on himself. But I think he hopefully seems like he's kind of relaxing a little bit, because these guys are very hard on themselves. And to just kind of touch on Mika real quick, Mika does the same thing. He's very hard on himself. So Igor's the same way. I wouldn't call it a controversy. Igor's still the guy. But it's tough. It's really hard for me to kind of put it all together because it's not an issue, but then it's also not something you can't really dismiss, if that makes any sense.
Totally.
You know,
that's actually perfectly well said, JL. Seriously.
Right. Because, you're not going to, Igor has a Vezina trophy. He's shown that he can bounce back. So you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But also, just as a fan from watching, you do express some concern. But at the same time, you also have to think with how well Jonathan Quick is playing, you have to kind of make sure that that you ride that wave if it means you're going to win. So I don't fully believe that it was the plan to ride Quick for the first 2 games. I think that was just said to save face, not to make Igor feel bad. Because, come on, I mean, Colorado and Tampa Bay, you really don't think that, oh, hey, let's play Igor in one of those games. But I get it. I'm fine with it because of the way that things have gone. Jonathan Quick has been nothing but phenomenal, like you've mentioned. And I don't think it's as big as it should be, but then it's also slightly concerning at the same time. But then I'm sure once crunch time comes, Igor will be fine. It just honestly, to me, it just really seems like he needs to work on his glove. And
there's data to support that. I know, I believe Arthur Staple wrote about it. Steve Valiquette tweeted about it. Arthur uses Valley's data from ClearSight Analytics in a lot of his articles. Yeah, he's giving up a ton of goals high glove. Like that's just, the one that was the shining example was the Keegan Kolazar goal in the Vegas game it was just a long wrist shot. I know, people are calling it a breakaway, but it really wasn't a breakaway. There was a defenseman kind of even with him. It was from the wing. Not a goal that Igor Shesterkin or really most quality NHL goaltenders should let in. Right. And that's been happening a lot. And the other thing is, as Valley tweeted or said, I don't know if it was on a broadcast or if it was on Twitter, but like the shooters know the data. Like this is the types of scouting reports that NHL teams get now. Like where are these goalies' weak spots? How do we target them, et cetera, et cetera. So look, I think I totally agree with you in the sense that this is something where it's worth talking about, whereas, if we had done this 2 weeks ago, even we would have said, nah, it's not really an issue. It's not worth discussing. Whereas it is now. Here's the way I'm looking at it. I think, you do the reset. Fine. I think it's a good idea. I honestly think he should start against Chicago because I cannot think of an easier landing spot on the schedule. Right. It's a bad team. The Rangers are playing well defensively, right? So they seem to have sort of straightened out their principles. Now that could go away at any time. I mean, stuff is fleeting, but the expectation would be that they are not going to give up, 15 or 20 high quality chances to the Chicago Blackhawks.
Right.
So you see how Igor does in that game, and then you see if he can get on a roll. My thing is, this almost has to be an evaluation period ahead of the playoffs, right? And with the idea, right, that Igor is going to start game 1 of round 1, and he's probably going to start game 2 of round 2. But I think for the first time in my memory, and my memory goes back a while now because I'm getting older, I think there's a legitimate chance that we do not see the same starting goalie in every playoff game. I mean, if you think about it, I go back to Mike Richter. Mike Richter pretty much started every game. Glenn Healy played in 94 because Mike Keenan was nuts and pulled Richter a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But in general, not in general, I'm pretty sure Richter started every playoff game. The rest of the runs in the 90s that they had, Richter started every playoff game. Once we got to the Hank era, obviously he started every single game, was rarely pulled. And Igor has started every single playoff game in his time here. So, and unquestionably was the case across the board. I think we are in a world now where unless Igor is lights out, and I mean lights out, like not Vezina level, because that was, a generational season, but unless he is truly himself statistically, mentally, stylistically, all those things, I think there's a good chance Jonathan Quick's going to get games in the playoffs. And I don't know how to feel about that because, and JL, I know you're a football fan, a fellow tortured Jet fan, and we have been through the whole, if you have 2 quarterbacks or 3 quarterbacks, you have 0 quarterbacks thing. I mean, I kind of feel like if you go into the playoffs with the 2 goalie system, you have no goalie, right? Like I kind of have that same mindset about the goaltender position in the playoffs. specifically as I do with the quarterback position in football. So maybe I'm being a little dramatic there, but how do you see that playing out? And do you think that that's the case, that, Quick maybe does get some starts in the playoffs?
No, I don't, unless it's really drastic. I don't think so. I think this is honestly just more of just a test period now. So we're probably going to see Jonathan Quick get more in the regular season. I don't think they're going to, unless Igor just completely craps the bed and, we see, like just like how, I think, I don't know if Igor got pulled in one of the Penguins games in the playoffs a couple years ago. I think he might have. But that was it, really. Igor's going to be the guy. They would be crazy not to either trust Benoit Allaire and not start Igor. You have to start your best goaltender. If it gets to a point where he ends up crapping the bed, then you basically have a 1A. But no, I think they're going to go full bore with Igor. They're probably going to do the whole load management thing, that we all seem to kind of decry about in terms of sports. So no, it's going to be Igor. I have no doubt. If it gets to the point where that has to be the case, then it's going to happen. But I think Igor is going to be the guy going forward, straight through, no problem.
Okay. Well, I think it's fascinating, and I'm trying to read the tea leaves here, and by the time some folks listen to this, it's probably going to be water under the bridge completely. But Peter Laviolette did not name the starter after practice today. Both goalies apparently left the ice at roughly the same time. That was the tweet from the beat writers, the report from the beat writers at practice. So the Rangers are not letting on who's starting. I think when you're putting up that type of smokescreen, it means you are starting Jonathan Quick. I think if it was going to be Igor the whole time, then they would have taken Igor off the ice first, and they would have announced that he was the starter today. So I think it's going to be Quick, and I think that the reason that the Rangers are doing that is to just avoid the 24 to 36 hours of of media, firestorm, Twitter questions, etc., about Quick getting his fourth straight start. So we'll see. I do hope that this works. By all accounts, Igor is in a much better headspace after the break. He seems confident. Mm-hmm. He's met with the media a bunch of times. I think he feels good about, his ability to take this reset and make it work. So we'll see. Right. I mean, look, it's easy to say, and this is my last point on this, and then we'll get to the questions. Everybody's kind of, falling back to the classic talking point. Like, the Rangers don't have a chance unless Igor Shesterkin is himself. And
right.
I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, how many teams have we seen make Stanley Cup runs with like no-name goaltenders? And the Rangers don't have no-name goaltenders. They have a current star and a future Hall of Famer as a backup. So, like, if Jonathan Quick had to carry them, I think he could. Like, I think it's ridiculous to just say, like, well, this whole season lives and dies with Igor Shesterkin. Like, no, why? I don't think it does.
Right. And you could take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights, for example, when they won the Stanley Cup. Who was their goaltender? Adin Hill.
Adin Hill was not the starter when the season started.
Right. And, no knock to Adin Hill. I mean, he's an NHLer, so he has us beat. But, nobody's going out and saying, hey, I'm going to go pick Adin Hill to be my number one goaltender. No, it was done out of necessity, and they ended up capitalizing on that because that team, a lot of people tend to forget, even though it's only been just about a year, was built with ridiculous talent. So that's how they were able to pull it off. And depth, right.
Because, I mean, whatever the stat is, I think each of their four lines all scored at least 10 or 12 goals in the playoffs. Like, they had this incredibly balanced scoring. And that's a lot of people have kind of identified that as the silver. And it's like, this is the thing, though. There is no silver bullet. There's different ways to do it. Some teams win the cup on the back of their goalie. Some teams win the cup on the backs of their stars. Some teams win the cup with great depth and balance. Some teams win the cup with just great team defense. Like, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I think people are falling prey to this. The Rangers really need Vezina Igor or else they're screwed. Like, I don't think so. They need good goaltending, and they have two guys that could potentially give it to them. So let's see how it goes. I'm not writing Igor's obituary here. I promise you that. But I also don't think the season is cooked if Jonathan Quick has to play more and potentially start playoff games.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I feel, we we're so used to seeing that, with Igor and Lundqvist, and even going as far back as you could even say, Georgiev throughout the regular season, who used to play pretty well for us. And then also, Mike Richter and even John Van Beesbrook. So, as Ranger fans, we've been blessed to see that outside of like the dark ages, of course. But even, we had Mad Mike Richter, when he wasn't injured. So this was kind of maybe the first time that there's kind of some doubt, but it's not that bad. Igor will be fine.
Yeah. All right. So on that, let's get to the questions. And this first one comes from at Bill to Spill, John Cougar Colleen Camp. So it's goaltender related. And it's a perfect segue.
Right.
He asks, was there ever a time in Ranger history where there wasn't a goaltending controversy, but you thought there should have been? It's actually a really interesting question.
That is. That's a good question. That's really hard to pinpoint because outside of maybe you can say Dan Blackburn, Mike Richter, but the only reason why that wasn't really big was because Dan Blackburn ended up getting hurt, unfortunately, because, he was going to be the guy, and then he all of a sudden shows up with, 2 blockers on. So,
yeah, if you're too young to remember or have seen or known about Dan Blackburn, Google that, because you're probably hearing that 2 blocker thing from JL and wondering what the hell he's talking about. But
no,
thing. I mean, the short story is massive injuries. He really couldn't raise his arms to catch a puck.
It was a nerve
catching glove. Right, it was a nerve
injury.
damage issue. So he tried to make a comeback wearing 2 blockers, and needless to say, it didn't go great. And it's a shame because he was really talented. I mean, you never know. I mean, remember right after that, the Rangers drafted Al Montoya, and he never turned out to be anything. High draft pick. They thought they were getting the next guy, and they actually were one of the teams who learned early that it's more of a quantity thing, right? You get a bunch of goalies in the late rounds of the draft, and you see who develops well. And of course, Henrik Lundqvist was a 7th round pick, right? So, that's a little bit of a tangent there on Dan Blackburn. I mean, look, the last time things got hairy with the goaltending situation was when they had the 3-headed monster. They had Georgiev, Lundqvist, and Igor, who had just come over from the KHL. That was in early 2020, in the 1920 season, and that wasn't a controversy. But I think trying to do the 3 goalie thing made it unnecessarily difficult. I remember thinking, like, why can't they find a trade for Georgiev? Like, he's pretty good. Wasn't having a great year that year, to be fair. But he's clearly talented, clearly was better with more work. And they either couldn't or didn't find a trade for him. And so you ended up with this thing where they had 3 goalies and one of them wasn't dressing, and Lundqvist was clearly on his way out, and Igor kind of took the net, which was the right move, but then they were splitting the backup starts between Lundqvist and Georgiev. That was a weird time. I mean,
yeah, that was strange because you basically had 3 starting NHLers and you didn't want to be the team, at least in the regular season, to kind of drop Lundqvist on his feet, on his butt rather. So it was
they were never going to do that. Yeah.
No, and obviously they bought him out that offseason, but it was just strange. I honestly think at that juncture they should have found a way to. I know it was a lot harder than it said because they really did try, but I really wish that somebody had taken a suitor for Georgiev and just kind of kept Lundqvist on a shorter contract. Obviously, we didn't know about his health issues, so it kind of ended up panning out in the end, due to his heart problem.
Right.
But if that didn't happen, I would have been more than happy to have kept Henrik as basically a backup until he retired. I always thought that would have been the fairest thing to do. It would have been so painful to have seen him put on that Capitals uniform. And, again, it sucks that he had that, heart injury. I would have loved to have seen him play. Would it have been sad? Yeah. But, it's just good that he's living comfortably now. And it's just that these things kind of tend to work out on their own. But that was definitely a strange time. I'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, also, you know, it's always fun to do this, bring them into the conversation when, you know, because they deserve to catch as many strays as possible. How silly do the Toronto Maple Leafs feel now, right? So Alexander Georgiev was out there available. They were trying everything. If you think back to
Yeah,
those days, I mean, they have not obviously had a stable goaltending situation since literally like Felix Potvin in the 90s.
that's true. Yeah.
And Georgiev was there to be had. The Rangers, I'm sure, had him out there and were taking calls on him. And I'm sure they had a fair value in mind, right? Knowing that he was a future starter in the league. Um, and of course, Colorado grabs him and goes and wins the Stanley Cup, right? With a team that's constructed very similarly to Toronto's. So,
Hmm.
and often what holds Toronto back is their goaltending. So, nice job, Kyle Dubas. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but like you can't moneyball the goaltending situation. Like, if there's a guy, you got to go get him. It's a yeah. Anyway, like I said, they deserve every stray they catch, the Toronto Maple
Oh,
Leafs.
of
So good
course,
job.
absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%.
But look, I mean, what I find interesting about this question is, and I think it's something just that I've always appreciated as a Ranger fan, even though, as I alluded to in my tweet before the show today, before we started recording today, like I hate talking about goalies because like it's the one thing that like we always come back to with the Rangers because they
Hmm.
usually have this elite goaltending. Usually they are over reliant on said goaltending, and it kind of makes everything else moot because it's like, oh well, you know, they're being propped up. Like this discussion with them, especially over the last like 6-7 seasons, has been like they're being propped up by this amazing goaltending. Um, and I get tired of talking about it. That said, um, it makes you appreciate how good the Rangers have been in this position throughout most of their history. I mean, they
Hmm.
have, and look, I'm a little bit of a history buff. I don't know I certainly wasn't around for anything before really the early 90s, of course. But you go back to Gump Worsley is a name.
Hmm.
You go back to the Eddie Jacquemin, right number retired, and his backup Gilles Villemure, which
Hmm.
they actually shared a Vezina trophy one season.
Yeah.
They were co-winners of the Vezina, and they pretty much split the net in that season. Um, right? Obviously, the 80s were a little bit of a weird time for goaltending, and the Rangers were a good team then, but they were not really as stable. You know, JD had that one hot season, got them to the finals in '79. A hot playoff run as a young goalie, but he wasn't really
Hmm.
a long-term solution. But then once you get to the 90s and most of our lifetimes, you have Mike Richter, Henrik Lundqvist, Igor Shesterkin, essentially a passing of the torch from one generational goalie to the
Hmm.
next. So
Right.
that's amazing. And, you know, to Mr. Colleen Camp's question, there haven't been a lot of goaltender controversies because the Rangers have been so solid, more than solid, so great at that position for so many years. I mean, if anything identifies this franchise, it's that they are historically the home of great goalies, and
Hmm.
that's a blessing for us as fans. And I think we just wish that they would build a little bit better team in front of those goalies so they could actually win some championships for them.
it's it always seems to be like the recurring theme when it's oh hey look we got a great goaltender but the team in front of him it's
Right.
so
It's
it's always the
somewhere between
case.
like average or bad to like just not good enough.
Yeah, and the one time that they actually did build a good team in front of their star goaltender, newsflash, they won the Stanley Cup.
Right.
So you kind of think they would want to replicate that, but
Yeah.
I
Well, and
guess
I
not.
always say like 2014 and 15, they certainly had good enough teams in front of
Oh
Lundqvist,
yeah.
but you know, just didn't get it done. Okay, next question. I don't do we know this guy? He goes by at Blue Seat Blogs on Twitter,
Oh
David
boy.
Shapiro. Don't
I
know him.
don't. We don't. He seems like a cranky old man, but
Yeah, and speaking of, he starts his question with hi, first time, long time,
what
WFAN
is this
reference.
WFAN? Come on.
Yeah, this question, and so we are going to read. Just for everybody's knowledge, we were going to have Nick on the show tonight, but then he got pulled into some work obligations. But he desperately wanted to answer this question, so I'm going to read his response at some point. But anyway,
Hmm.
this is a very obnoxious question from Dave. Let's just call it for what it is. What package do you offer for Pavel Buchnevich at 50% salary retained? Meaning he's on the books for 2.9 million this year and next. No cop outs. You must make this trade. I want to watch the world burn. I'll hang up and listen. All right. So I'm bad at this trade proposal stuff, but anyway, JL, you start, and then I'll read Nick's response, and then we will. I'll give mine, and then we'll move on.
So obviously Buchnevich has term, so that goes without saying. It's definitely going to cost a prospect. Definitely not Othman. Definitely not Sikora. I'm assuming that if they were to give up a prospect in this trade, in terms of retaining and keeping Booch here for another year with salary retained, it's going to be Brett Berard. Berard, it has to be a first, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Berard a first. Maybe Zach Jones, maybe Matthew Robertson, and then maybe another prospect or two, and then maybe like a second. Because I know it kind of sounds like a lot, but I'm thinking similar to the Tarasenko trade, and Hunter Skinner, and a couple of picks and the first round pick. So I'm assuming because Buchnevich has term, and maybe they get lucky enough if they were to really do that and they actually offload Barclay Goodrow to kind of offset that contract. So that's what I think. So it's going to be Buchnevich with salary retained for 2 years for Zach Jones, Brett Berard, first round pick, and maybe another prospect and a second round probably. So
you're sending 4 assets that way. Okay.
4 assets for Booch and the only reason why I'm sending 2 primarily is just because he's being retained. So that's why the contract goes into next year.
Right. Of course.
And for the record, I'm also terrible at these kind of things too. So I apologize in advance.
Oh no. Yeah. This is not my forte. So I'll read Nick's response now. So he says Kakko and Jones, and a conditional 2 that turns into a 1 if we make the Stanley Cup final this year. Booch being back here, especially up top with 20 and 93, Kreider and Zibanejad will give that line the kick in the ass it sorely needs. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, my brain went directly to Kakko as well. And the reason I say that is because this is basically just a repeat of the original trade where except the Blues are kind of in the position of the Rangers, right? Where they're not going to want to pay Buchnevich again because, his next contract will be definitely a raise. I mean, he's a point per game player. Look, let's give him credit where credit is due. He's a super impactful point per game player. The Rangers lost that trade, and he is, a player that would fit like a glove on this team currently, right? So 100%. That is all fair. He's going to earn a raise on his $5.8 million a year cap hit next year. So in his next contract, 2 seasons from now, assuming he keeps up the point per game production. So $7.5 million a year, $8 million a year, right? How long is that deal? 5-6 seasons. There's going to be trade protection in that deal. So that is a massive contract that the Blues probably don't want to give Pavel Buchnevich, right? So the motivation would be get a young player with upside that could potentially replace him for cheap, and that's Kaapo Kakko, right? He's in a very similar spot to what Buchnevich was 3 seasons ago.
Right.
Now, look, Buchnevich was always a more productive player. I think it's very important to point that out. Kakko's got great metrics. He obviously shows his value defensively and in terms of puck possession, but he has not ever produced like Pavel Buchnevich. And look, Buch had more power play time than Kakko for sure. But he's just a more natural finisher and playmaker than Kakko is. So I think it's fair though to I think Nick's offer is close. I would say probably they're not doing that deal with it if it's a conditional pick. I think they're probably doing that deal, to your point, JL. It would be something like Kakko, Jones, a first, and like a third, or like another pick or another like B-level prospect. So that's kind of where I land with it as well. But my mind went right to Kakko. And I think it's hard to argue with the last part of Nick's point there that, he would give 20 and 93 the kick in the ass they would need, and he would kind of complete that line. I do want to say one thing about this whole thing, if you'll indulge me. So I think that the Rangers trading Buchnevich was not just about clearing salary and kind of that whole he's an RFA and, we're not going to pay him his next deal thing.
Right.
I think Chris Drury made that move. Maybe, and I think maybe he's learned from this. I would hope he's learned from it. I think he made that deal essentially in the heat of the moment when he was, having James Dolan breathe down his neck about needing to change the culture of the team, right? Because remember, that deal is made in the aftermath of Tom Wilson, quote unquote, breaking the Rangers,
Yes.
them shrinking like violets in huge spots down the stretch of that season. Them coming off as a little bit too much of a nice team, them being a little bit too much of a vibes team, all those things, right? Booch and Kreider, and Booch is a clown, right? Quinn called him Captain Happy, and he was like the class clown, and I think there was a little bit of an effort from Drury there to sort of frankly change the culture of the team, and now and basically say, look, we're going to go out and get Sammy Blais, who, yes, we believe in his offensive upside, which to this point doesn't really seem like it's showing. Obviously, he had that hot streak last season after he was traded back to St. Louis, but I checked his stats a few weeks ago. I think he had like 2 goals. So he's not a very good offensive player, but he's physical. He's a grinder, a bottom sixer, whatever you want to call him. I think there was an effort to change the culture by making that deal, right? Not just dump the salary that they don't eventually want to pay. So it was a bad move. I think we all acknowledge that. And I don't think he's coming back. I'll say that. So thank you, Dave, though, for the question. And I hope you enjoyed watching the world burn.
Oh, David.
All right. Next question comes from at Chris Saletti. Interesting last name, Chris. I love this question. You can put one Ranger from the 2014 Cup finalist team on this current team, but they have to replace someone on the same line/D pair, as in you can't replace Tyler Pitlick with Rick Nash. Fine. So if you're, and I know the Zook, Brassard, Pouliot line was like technically the third line, but like really that was probably the second line, whatever. That's a bit semantics, but who are you choosing? All right. So JL, if you want to take a stab at this one first.
I'm switching out Rick Nash for Artemi Panarin.
Wait, you're taking Panarin off the team, off this Ranger team?
Oh no, it says you can put one Ranger from on this current team. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry. I thought it was the other way around because I can't read. Sorry, Chris.
Right.
I'm going to swap. Wow, that's a good question. This might be controversial to say, but I'm swapping out Eric Gustafsson for John Moore. And I'll tell you why.
Wow.
I like Gustafsson. I like Gus. I do. But John Moore had a little bit more of a grit to his game, kind of sort of for a third pair D. And him and Kevin Kline were phenomenal as a bottom pair D. So, and one of the things that this team could really use is somebody with a little more snarl outside of Trouba and Lindgren on the back end. So, and John Moore can skate. He was a decent skater at best. He wasn't a pylon back there.
No, he's a good skater. Good skater.
So you put him with a guy like Schneider, and they'll just start. Basically, what I'm getting at is I think John Moore and Gustafsson are essentially similar players, but John Moore has a little bit more grit to his game. I love Gus. I do. This is not a knock on Gus at all. But I think I would do that because now you have a guy who has some mileage like Gus, but has a little bit more toughness to his game. I'll say this too about John Moore. I was very, very, very sad. Even though we got Keith Yandel in that deal, I was very sad that they traded him for and Duclair in that Yandel trade. But, obviously it had to be done, of course, even though Alain Vigneault wouldn't know how to hold a roster or use his players properly, Eric Stahl, Keith Yandel, and all that. So, yeah, I'd swap John Moore with Eric Gustafsson.
Interesting. Okay. I am going to go with Brad Richards for Johnny Brodzinski. So this team needs better play from their center. They just need more center quality and depth, right? We know that. Brad Richards was bought out after the 2014 season, right? He wasn't there in 2015. And, I think it's fair to say that his tenure in New York was a slight disappointment. Disappointment might be a harsh word, but he was excellent in the 2014 playoffs. He slowed down a little bit by the Montreal series. He wasn't much of a factor in the King series, but I mean, he's the exact type of player that I think this current Ranger team needs, an experienced, gritty center who can bring some scoring. I mean, think about him on a line with Cooley and Kako. I mean, that
would be
that would be awesome. That would just be a grinding in your face.
I love that
Third line
with
good scoring pop now at this point, right? And Richards is going to quarterback the second power play unit, which, again, something to watch. I'm not saying it's broken for good, but the top power play unit is struggling, but the second power play unit is not really equipped to step in and take over, right? Because they don't have that type of presence on the unit. They don't have somebody who can truly quarterback it. For some reason, it's one of the very few weird decisions Peter Laviolette has made lately is putting Trouba on the second power play instead of Eric Gustafsson. I have no idea. Like I trust Gustafsson to quarterback a power play more than Trouba. Regardless, Brad Richards, I honestly think he fits this team like a glove, and he would be the perfect 3C. So, and I think, look, if there was a Brad Richards analog available at this trade deadline, I don't really know who it is, but that would be the guy to go and get. I think it's exactly what they're missing.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm thinking about it in context. It is interesting to see that he was essentially the third center.
He played with, so let's remind people what the lines were on that team. You had Stepan, Nash and
Brassard.
No, because Brassard was the center with
Nash and Zuccarello, right?
No, because it was Brassard, Pouliot, and Zuccarello was that line.
Brassard, Pouliot, Zuccarello. Then I'm thinking Kreider, Stepan, Nash.
Kreider, Stepan, and Nash, and it was Richards, Hagelin, and Marty St. Louis was the third line.
That's right. Okay, I had to correct myself. I should know that because that's easily one of my favorite teams.
Yeah, right. And then the fourth line was obviously Boyle, Moore, and either Dorsett or Carcillo. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm and again, the second and third line often gets mixed up in terms of which is which. Again, they were calling the Brassard line the third line that year. Maybe it was, but let's just say middle six, right? So the middle six of that team was Brassard, Pouliot, Zuccarello, Hagelin, Richards, and St. Louis. I think you plug Richards into the Rangers' current middle six, and you're in fantastic shape.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's actually a lot better than mine, because I thought that Richards, it's the same thinking that you had, was Richards is basically the 2C, and that Brassard line was the third line, but being that they used them a little bit more, and St. Louis was kind of with Hagelin and Richards a little bit less. I see what you mean by that, so that definitely does make sense.
Yeah, it's semantics, but it's a really interesting question. And like I said, I'd be scouring the market right now for whoever, seems to project and look the most like Brad Richards as a center. So if that guy is out there, he's the guy to target. All right, last question comes from Kevin at Spozo211. Why don't they play the damn Super Bowl on Saturday? Do you have strong feelings about this, JL?
I really don't. It doesn't really matter. Football is a Sunday thing. So you're going to capitalize on the day that you make all your money. Would it be interesting to see it? Yeah, but, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, so obviously, look, I think people would watch it no matter what night it's on. I don't buy the television viewership angle. That said, I think we are very quickly trending towards the Super Bowl being played 1 week later. Once they collectively bargain in that 18th game, whatever it takes to do, they're going to do that, because right now it's a 17-game regular season and it's an imbalance in terms of home and away games. It just doesn't really make sense. They're going to try and get an 18th game into the schedule. The owners are, I'm sure of it, right? More revenue, longer season. That's what they want. Players will hate it, but they'll probably cave. And then the Super Bowl will be pushed back a week. And if it's pushed back a week, that will fall on the President's Day weekend. So you'll have the Super Bowl, like for instance, this year would be on, I think, the 17th or 18th, whatever day it is. And then the following Monday is a federal holiday and everybody will be off, because that was always the argument. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the Super Bowl was played in January. And people are like, man, they should just do this on Martin Luther King weekend. Like, just change the schedule so that everybody gets the day off for Martin Luther King Day. And it's like,
right.
That's basically what they're aiming for here. But look, to your point, JL, I mean, they own Sunday, and it's called Super Bowl Sunday. Like, I'm sure that's trademarked, just like the term Super Bowl is. And they're not going to change that. So just wait a few years until the next CBA gets negotiated, and I'm sure you'll have your day off after the Super Bowl so you can indulge however you like to indulge.
Of course. And it's interesting point you talk about the adding of the extra game. It's like, it's unfortunate, but we all know that that's what's going to end up happening. And you just kind of, the football season's already long enough as is. Do we need more football? And I love football, but I don't think we need that much.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, this isn't a football show, but with lengthening the season with the amount of injuries that there already are, I mean, you can set your watch by it with the NFL. Like, by week 4, like, at least 10 star players are going down with season-ending injuries. Like, it's just how it is. That torn Achilles, torn ACLs, like, broken bones, separated shoulders, concussions, right? Whatever it is. Like, it's a brutal sport. And 16 games is probably the max that the human body can handle. And they're going to go to beyond that. So look, money talks. That's the way of the world. That's certainly the way of professional sports. And, it's kind of unfortunate in that regard. And, look, maybe the players won't cave, because the NFL does have a strong union, and they certainly have plenty of good arguments against adding more wear and tear to the bodies of the athletes. But, interesting question as we are to the Super Bowl. JL, do you have a pick? Are you rooting for anybody in this game? And do you have a pick?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't really care.
You don't hate the Chiefs like everybody else now?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, obviously the only reason why I don't really hate the Chiefs is because, it was different with the Patriots, because that was in a direct correlation to my suffering, because they had to get through us every single year. But no, it's just, I think the Chiefs are going to win. I kind of want San Francisco to win, have somebody different. I know a couple of 49ers fans. I'd want them to be happy. I don't dislike Patrick Mahomes, not yet, even though the refs did kind of screw the Jets in that one game that I was at. But, Pat Mahomes' dad, former Met, if he wins, so be it. The Jets had another season where they didn't win the Super Bowl. I can live another day if I've already lived the last 31 years of my life without having to see one. So until next year. So, I watch it because it's there. It's something. It's the biggest event of the year for football. I watch it. So,
yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll definitely watch it. I've come to a point in life where I really can't get aboard like hate trains. It's very hard for me to do it. And I'm actually sort of the opposite, where I start to really respect and appreciate greatness. And like, look, I think Mahomes is a little annoying, to be honest. I watched a little bit of the Netflix quarterback series, and he comes across incredibly obnoxious in that, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, of course.
He just not a likable guy at all, to be perfectly honest, but he's great, and nobody is as good as him. And like, I have no problem with the best team winning. Like, I actually find it weird when like the World Series is the Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks, because they clearly were not the two best teams. And like, I actually would rather the two best teams play, because I think that's the most A, entertaining, and B, fairest way to decide a champion. So
that's also you want from every sport too,
Right. And look, these are the two best teams from their respective conferences. Like, I know the Chiefs weren't the 1 seed, but like, come on, it's the Chiefs. They had a couple of weird, games early in the year where they had to figure out their shit, but and they did almost lose to the Jets, but they didn't. And yeah, I mean, look, I'm a little scared. I don't want to put money on the Chiefs. I do think the Chiefs will win. I'm scared to put money on them though, because like so much public, like I think 80% of the bets are on the Chiefs, which is just like ripe for like fade the public, basically. Like, you should actually just bet the Niners. So we'll see. But if I had to give you a pick, I think the Chiefs will win the game, and I think it'll be like a 6 to 10 point game. Actually, I think if they win, it'll be like 27-21 or 30-21 or something like that.
That's usually what ends up. It's usually somebody always gets at least 3 scores. So that usually that's what ends up happening.
Yeah. Which is like a month's worth of points if you're a Jet fan. So
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. We'll see if that changes next year. All right, JL, been a pleasure. Rangers are back on track. That's awesome to see. They played 3 really solid games in a row now. Very intrigued to see who starts in goal in Chicago on Friday night. Want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you catch us on Spotify and Apple if you're doing audio only. We're on YouTube as well. And hopefully you're going to have some different types of video content on the channel as well. So thank you, JL, for getting that all set up and going.
Of course. Oh, also real quick, if anyone's listening to this and follows my old account, I'm working to get that back. Follow me at JL Shapiro and J. Please, I'm trying to get as many followers back as possible, and I would love to engage with everybody again if my old account is having some issues. So
yes, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you plugged yourself there because I forgot to give you an opportunity to do so. So thank you. All right, gang, always a pleasure, and we'll talk to you next week.